Welcome, I'm Ari Lax, and this week for a change, I will not be bringing you an Eldrazi deck. Shocking. So I've decided to go with a deck that, for having zero Thought-Knots here, has been seeing a decent amount of success, which is Living End. It feels reasonably positioned against the Eldrazi decks, and is still an actual deck against the rest of the field. Um, Worth noting, it's had, like, reasonable finishes lately. Specifically, the one I'm thinking of is, like, Michael Simon, who's kind of, like, the living end guy from I don't even know. He's just played that deck a lot, even though his GP top 8 was with Twin. But he recently had a X2 finish at I believe GP Pittsburgh a while back, uh, where he missed top 8 on tie breaks. But yeah, the deck's good. It also popped to the World Championships. This list specifically is from last weekend's Philadelphia Modern Classic, played by Brett Schmuckler. I chose this specific list for a couple reasons. One, I've kind of gotten sick of having Jungle Weaver in my deck and just having these like inefficient hands that don't cycle well, and clunk me up against potential opposing graveyard hate that I want to like position my cycling around. So I like the four Architect's Will. I like the Shriekmaw's main in an Eldrazi metagame. And I also like the idea of Goblin Dark Dwellers. There's a lot of really obnoxious spots in this deck. So for those, just to fill in the gaps, so the idea here is that you don't have anything to cascade into besides Living End. You put a bunch of cyclers in your graveyard and they all come back. But you can run into this issue where like if you draw two Living Ends or like draw, which as much as like that seems like an oddity, it just happens. I've tested the deck a ton, and every time I play it, I just like want to die a little because it's just like, oh, I drew two Living Ends again and again and again. Oh look. And you have these spots where like you have one shot to living end them, so you can like outburst and then you hit your one living end and then they like counter it or whatever. Um, so Dark Fellows is a bit of insurance against that kind of nonsense. It can also create weird loops and rebuy Beast Within, so I am perfectly fine with trying it. Mana's pretty stock. The only thing that's worth noting is the Steam Vents over a different blue land for Architects. I don't think it matters a lot. Uh, I think that really what this points to is that more important than having the land. So usually you see like a Water Grave for some reason as a stock before, but I like the idea of having a blue source. So like your Steam Vents is adding value not because you're casting your Architects, but because it's a red source that can cycle in Architects. Um, I like what that implies. I don't like it with the fetch split, but I don't think it's that big of an issue to not be casting your 4 mana 3/3 with a marginal ability in Modern. Um, it's about the right amount of lands as usual. 3 Simian Spirit Guides, pretty stock. The Dryad Arbor is here so that you can fetch it and chump block if you need to. Also fetch it and Demonic Dread it if you need a target. Let's see what else about the main deck. Not a lot. This is a pretty straightforward one. Uh, the only thing about Jungle Weaver is that it does brick Reality Smasher, but I think that the goal here is that you just go around a Reality Smasher. The other cool part of this deck that I like looking at the sideboard is Dampening Matrix, which covers like Scavenging Ooze and Relic and Affinity reasonably well as a hate card. So I was pretty happy with that idea. Uh, I've seen people talk about how you don't necessarily need Ricochet Trap anymore, which is reasonable. Uh, More Shriek Maws because you know all the Eldrazi die to it, and then you've evoked it, so it comes back off living it and kills whatever. Gnaw to the Bone's pretty stock to just not die to burn decks. Um, Jund Charm's a reasonable flex slot. I don't mind having some kind of effect that can, hate the mirror, or oh gosh, I don't even want to think about the mirror. I really hope I don't play the mirror. Sweep small creatures or do whatever Jund Charm does. And it's worth noting the main deck's light on Fairy Macabres, which makes you a little softer against Affinity because it helps break up Arcbound Ravager shenanigans where they can sacrifice the board and get it all back. But this card also just kind of sucks if it's not actively stopping their strategy. So I'm okay with not having it because it just like this main deck looks really fluid is what I'm trying to get at here. There's not a lot of filler. There's a lot of land destruction, specifically targeted cards for Eldrazi. Like, this is the only potential filler thing, which I'm fine with. Yeah, so uh, I'm excited to see how this deck does. Like, I understand I won't necessarily play a ton of Eldrazi, but it feels like this deck's actually reasonable against them as they move away from Chalice of the Void. I guess that's the other big thing. At the Pro Tour, this deck, not reasonable. Week after, not reasonable. And then people realize that Drowner of Hopes is better than Chalice of the Void. So they moved that direction, which is why you can start doing this stuff again.